Australia is famous for a lot of weird things. Kangaroo warning signs, meat pies at sporting events, slang that sounds like a language of its own. But one of the strangest and most quietly powerful features of the country isn't something you can see. It's something you feel. It's called the Barassi line. And even though it doesn't show up on any map, it's one of the most culturally significant divides in the country. This invisible boundary cuts through Australia and essentially determines whether you grew up playing, watching, and obsessing over Australian rules football, better known as AFL, or one of the two flavors of rugby, either rugby league or rugby union. The Barassi line is named after Ron Barassi, an AFL legend who was so iconic during the mid-20th century that his name became synonymous with the game itself. And while he didn't invent the line, his name came to represent the cultural dominance of Aussie rules in the southern and western parts of the country. Roughly speaking, the Barassi line starts near the northeastern tip of Tasmania, crosses Bass Strait, and runs through eastern Victoria, cuts through southern New South Wales, and finishes somewhere near the Northern Territory's eastern edge. To the west and south of the line, places like Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia, and Tasmania, the AFL is more than a sport. It's what kids play in schools, what dominates TV broadcasts, and what cities shut down for when final season rolls around. But go north and east into New South Wales and Queensland, and suddenly you're in rugby league and rugby union heartland. AFL barely registers on the radar. People talk about tries, tackles, and the state of origin, and if you start talking about marks and behinds, you'll probably get confused looks. What's truly bizarre is how rigid this divide has been over time. Despite all the national branding, broadcasting, and efforts to unify Australian sport under one big multicultural umbrella, the Barassi line has proven to be one of the most enduring and stubborn cultural boundaries in the country. To understand how this happened, we need to jump back to the 1800s, when Australia wasn't yet a federation, but a scattered collection of British colonies, each doing its own thing with little regard for national unity. In the colony of Victoria, the winters were long, the fields were muddy, and cricket players needed something to do in the off-season. So, in 1859, a group of blokes in Melbourne, including Tom Wills, a key figure in early Aussie sport, decided to create their own game. It took some elements from rugby, some from Gaelic football, and a few homegrown rules, and the result was Australian rules football. Faster paced, more kicking, fewer scrums, and way more open play. At the same time, over in New South Wales and Queensland, the ruling class had closer ties to Britain's public schools, where rugby union reigned supreme. These colonies adopted rugby early and turned it into an institution, particularly in elite schools and universities. Later, in 1908, the game splintered again in New South Wales with the introduction of rugby league, a professional alternative that appealed more to working-class fans and players. So, by the early 20th century, Australia wasn't just split politically or geographically, it was culturally divided by sport. In Melbourne, every kid wanted to play for the Tigers, Bombers, or Magpies. In Sydney or Brisbane, they dreamed of wearing a Blues or Maroons jersey in the Origin series. From the beginning, media played a huge role in reinforcing the line. Local newspapers and radio stations focused exclusively on their region's code. Sports bulletins on TV would either ignore or briefly mention the other code. Even today, if you're watching the nightly news in Melbourne and the Storm, Melbourne's NRL team, wins a massive game, they might still get a 10-second mention, while the AFL gets a full segment and detailed highlights. Flip that situation in Sydney, and it's the exact opposite. Now, both codes have long recognized the artificiality of this divide and have tried, aggressively at times, to expand into enemy territory. The AFL's biggest success in rugby country came with the Sydney Swans, originally the South Melbourne Football Club, which relocated to Sydney in 1982. It was a bold experiment, and for years the results were mixed. Sydney, a city used to rugby league, was slow to warm to AFL's complex rules and long matches. But the Swans' consistent performance and, most critically, their 2005 premiership, their first in 72 years, catapulted them into the city's consciousness. Suddenly, AFL was getting real traction in a rugby town. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the line, the Melbourne Storm were established in 1997 as the NRL's southern outpost. With slick marketing and some impressive early wins, they managed to build a loyal following despite being a rugby league team in the very heart of AFL country. Still, the cultural resistance is hard to overstate. In Melbourne, the Storm might win a championship and get less buzz than a mid-season AFL trade rumour. These expansions have shown that while you can build teams in foreign codes, it's far harder to shift deeply rooted habits, identities, and loyalties. In the modern era, the Barassi line isn't as clearly defined as it once was, but it absolutely still matters. AFL still dominates in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart. Rugby league remains king in Sydney, Brisbane, and northern New South Wales. During the AFL Grand Final, the entire state of Victoria virtually shuts down. The Friday before the match is literally a public holiday in Melbourne. Meanwhile, in Queensland and New South Wales, the State of Origin, a best-of-3 rugby league series, draws millions of viewers and more emotional investment than some federal elections. And here's where it gets political. Politicians, especially prime ministers, know that sport is a cultural cheat code. A PM from Melbourne might casually reference the AFL during a press conference to score easy points. One from Sydney, he's probably rocking a Blues scarf during Origin season. Even policy announcements sometimes get timed around big games because that's when the public is most tuned in. The Barassi line also exposes class divisions, migration patterns, and the legacy of British colonial influence. It shows how sports weren't just adopted for fun, but were often imposed, promoted, and protected by the institutions that shaped early Australia. So, what does the future hold? With younger generations growing up on TikTok highlights, multi-sport athletes, and global sports content, the traditional codes are having to work harder to retain loyalty. AFL and NRL are investing heavily in women's competitions, junior development, and multicultural outreach to stay relevant. And while the Barassi line might blur further, don't expect it to disappear overnight. The history runs too deep, the tribalism is too fierce, and the local pride still fuels rivalries that feel older than the nation itself. But maybe that's the beauty of it. The Barassi line is one of those strange Australian quirks that makes total sense once you live there, and seems completely bizarre to outsiders. It's not a border you can see, but once you cross it, you'll know. So next time you're in Australia and someone says they love footy, do yourself a favor and ask them, which one? Because that answer won't just tell you what sport they watch, it'll tell you where they're from, what tribe they belong to, and which side of one of the weirdest cultural lines in the world they stand on. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and let's discuss. And if you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss out on more deep dives like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.